Hey, here we are for episode 57 of They Talk Funny, and my guest today is the fabulous, the mayor of stand-up comedy. It's Sandra Battaglini. Welcome, Sandra. How are you doing?
Oh my God, that's a loaded question these days. I'm good. You know what? Today I'm good. The full moon is tomorrow, so we've got
full moon.
We got a lunar eclipse.
Lunar eclipse, the opposite of a full moon, an empty moon.
But it's full moon tomorrow night.
Yes, but it'll pass in the shadow, so it'll disappear.
Yeah, so it's like there's a lot going on.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
watch your tides.
Yeah. Be careful. Look both ways, always.
Always. We were just discussing before we went live, and hello, we got some people watching us. If you have any questions that you want to add into the show, if you have anything that you want to ask Sandra about, you can just write them in the chat, and I'll bring them up onto the screen as I'm fiddling around with the wrong things here. We were just discussing beforehand. We were trying to remember where we have met because we haven't really shared a lot of stage time together. I remember the Dark Comedy Festival. There was a competition portion, and I lost to you in that one.
But when your photo was up, just running before, I'm like, oh yeah, of course I know this guy. Like, you know, it's just you. Maybe it's the mustache. Did you have a mustache before?
No. I didn't have a mustache then. I've had the mustache for a number of years. I'm also like you. I'm also an actor. So, there's a lot of people who know me as Uncle Gord or as Joe the Plumber, or, you know, I've been doing a lot of things. I get cast in creepy things with the mustache like this. I'm either a creep or a cop. But
okay, I've been pigeonholed as an Italian widow. Yeah,
I heard about that. That seems a lot more niche than just cop or creep.
It's so niche. It's really ridiculous. And like, I think I've been cast 8 or 9 times now.
I had no idea there was 8 or 9 different, like that many roles for Italian widows.
I know, you'd be surprised. Also, like, there's just widow roles too. Like, then it's like, oh, you know, I think about, oh, this character, like I played this Italian nonna in a children's show last summer, and I was like, oh, for sure she's a widow. Like, obviously, where's nonno? You know what I mean? Where's the grandpa? So yeah, that was the first time I played a grandmother. I know, can you imagine? It was super fun though.
Yeah. No, my agent only finally just started sending me out for 50-year-old roles now, and I'm 52. So I've been going out for the 40 to 45 for a while. Now he's kind of finally put me up to closer to my real age.
Like, I'm going to be 50 in a couple of weeks, but it's like I can play, you know, sometimes it's like pretty young, and then play older. Who knows? You know, I'm like, if I get cast, I get the job. That's a nice thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's all. Get the job. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Talk about getting the job. All right. Normally we started talking about your stand up, so I'm going to get into Cask and the mayor of comedy a little bit later. But I mean, you are the mayor of comedy. You've stepped down as the CEO of Cask, but you are still
President,
the spokesperson.
Yeah, I'm still. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I still. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, people still. Yeah, I'm definitely the spokesperson. And still working on certain issues, like, for example, the export strategy. That's the one. That's my, passion project. Getting Canadians outside into Europe and literally using the European market and then just sort of opening it all up. And we attended the virtual trade mission to Germany in March. We're attending the virtual trade mission to Sweden. We were supposed to go last June, which I was so excited for it. But yeah, the idea is to create like a highway and build up on these exchange. It's an exchange tour model that was developed between Canada and France. That tour was supposed to happen last year, and of course it didn't. But it was like about 2 years ago, someone from France, an agency from France, approached us after that whole Just for Laughs thing and said, "Hey, why don't we work together? What if we did an exchange tour?" And I mean, Cask isn't producing it. Joanne Britton is from the Mob's Press, who does all our social media. Yeah, you know the Mob.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I love Jo. Jo's fantastic.
Yeah, she really is. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's how that started. So that's really, to me, it's like, because of the issue of crossing the border to the United States is so complicated. And, it's like, I don't know, it's just so much work. And it's like you go in and you just go there and you become unknown again. And it's so expensive. And it's just like, what if there was like a branded, mission to export Canadian comedy and start telling the world the legacy of Canadian comedy. And this has been my pitch to the Department of Heritage for years, and they all loved it, because their new directive, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, was to find new ways to export Canadian culture and identity. Before, it used to be just very, nationalistic, internal. And then I was like, well, we believe there's no greater way or no cheaper way than through stand-up comedy, or comedy in general, but really stand-up. I mean,
Not a huge set design. It's easy to travel. You're not taking truckloads of gear.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the disparity? I want to talk about your comedy, but
yeah, let's whatever you want. Yeah, I know. It just gets, this topic is just so
well, you're passionate about it, which shows, and that's, I mean, we needed somebody who was passionate and driven, who was able to take it and take it up the rungs of power to try to at least be heard.
Yeah.
By the way, for anyone who has not seen the Mayor of Comedy, you can watch it for free currently at that web address. So mayorofcomedy.com.
Yeah.
It is available. It's going to be in the links after the show. I will make sure to add it to the show links after. But you're not thinking about trying to do anything about the disparity with American comics coming into Canada? No protectionism at all.
No, well, that was never our goal. So when the very first time we went to Ottawa, which was in 2017, the year we launched Cask and the petition to have comedy recognized as an art form, we were approached by a lobby firm in Ottawa, and they were like, labor mobility is a top priority for the Canadian team, so we think we can help you. And so that was really exciting. And like, I was just talking to Monty, about who's the new president, Monty Scott. And I was like, I lobbied the exec to take, like, the lobby group were like, don't worry about paying us. Like, we want you to pay us, but don't worry about it. We can really help you. So I lobbied, the exec to be like, come on guys, this is a real opportune time. This gets us right in. And we took on the burden. Like, we were like, if we don't raise money, then it's on us. And we took out insurance for it. So the initial exec, literally, we did out of pocket for so many things. So anyways, by the time we went to Ottawa in June, we were in an all-out trade war. And the very first meeting I had was with the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And I know his name, but it's just escaping me right now. And he's a military guy, and he was amazing. He's like, okay, he goes, I have 15 minutes. Tell me what the story is. And so my story is like, being a Canadian comedian is like, a circle of entrapment. Because once you do the festivals or clubs, you've hit the ceiling. And then once and then you're like, well, I'll go and, apply for some arts funding, and that doesn't exist. Oh, I'll go to the United States. Well, there's that major barrier that's not reciprocal. And then finally, it's like when we want to apply for, when we want to pitch television shows, our networks say, well, it's a great idea. Why don't you go and sell that to the United States? Because it's cheaper for us to buy American content. So when he heard that story, he's like, well, if the Americans are putting a tariff on us, then maybe we should do the same to them. Because at that time, that's what they were being tasked to do. They were being tasked to find whatever, establish tariffs on certain things. And so this made sense. And so we were made to consider it. And we were like, oh God, that's not like with our lobbyists, we had a strategy. It was not for protectionism. Although in hindsight, you know, it might have been something to do. But by the time we left Ottawa, it had all but, you know, was no longer even at the table. And yeah, anyways, there's a longer story there. But we followed up with them about a couple of weeks later, and then we're like, hey, what's happening with the labor mobility issue? And they're like, oh, well, you know, we don't want to bring that up because the, you know, the guy, the blonde guy is going to get really mad, Trump.
Right.
So then we follow up with them in December, and we said, what is happening with the labor mobility issue? And they said, we didn't bring it up because we didn't want to bring up the cultural exemption issue. And the cultural exemption issue was for Canada. Our culture was not up for negotiation, i.e., there's videos of Justin Trudeau talking about this, i.e., it would be unconscionable for Americans to tell our news, for example, and, you know, for our broadcasters who are you know, who put out our culture. And I said to them, I was like, what culture? I'm like, they mostly buy American content. And they're like, so I'm like, oh, you guys didn't bring up the labor mobility issue because you were protecting Bell and Rogers. And so that's the truth of it. Because that's the, you know, the fear is if AT&T or any of these big companies come in, they swallow up our telecoms. And, you know, I mean, that might be inevitable. It's really, when you break it down, it's really sad sometimes.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the double sad for as a Canadian performer is the fact is, a lot of the independent clubs, or at least the clubs that I've seen and dealt with, would prefer to get American headliners in because there's no tariff. It's what, $40 or whatever.
Not even. You know, they don't sometimes even pay that.
Yeah, and to bring them in because they have name recognition, but that means the Canadian performers cannot get name recognition
ever. It's a lazy system here.
Yeah. Now I live in Quebec, so francophone performers do have a star system, and they even have like a feeder school to it, with L'École d'Humour. And they have panel shows, etc., which panel shows being like the easiest, you know, low cost setup things that they could be doing to be putting out Canadian content featuring Canadian performers. But we're going off on a rant that we both agree to the same thing, and it is the sad part of our current predicament or our current career path. Now, how would you describe your comedy if I can get us a little bit back on track?
I mean, I would say like there's a lot of, you know, it's satirical. Oh geez, how can I describe it? I mean, biting? It's pretty, what's that?
Biting?
Oh yeah. Yes. Sometimes when like I had friends, you know, I was with some friends and we were like, let's look at YouTube. And then one of my videos came up and they were like, you know, it's friends I just started hanging out with. And they're like, let's look at your video on YouTube. And then, some of the jokes was like, oh my God, like just seeing them, you know your jokes, but when you don't, you know, it'd been quite a while, they were like 10-year-old jokes. Like one of them, especially, I'm like, oh, I couldn't do that now, you know? But yeah, definitely biting. A lot of it is, you know, not a lot, you know, sometimes it's about my family. You know, and often I have like jokes about the advertisements because I worked in that area for a couple of years in branding and advertising.
I mean, I've also watched that you're not afraid to go into the audience. You're not Joan Rivers, but you don't mind antagonizing a little bit.
We have the same birthday. We have the same birthday.
You do?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So it could be a star sign thing.
You know, and when I remember when I was a kid, because I'd watch her on the shopping channel, and when I found out it was her and I had the same birthday, I'm like, that's amazing. I didn't, you know, it's not like I wanted to be a comedy then. I wanted to be a comedian. That's funny. Now that I say that, my dad, when I first started doing comedy, he said to me, he goes, so you want to be a comedy? And that was the name of the very first show I produced, like this variety show.
Yeah. No. So, I think my parents died believing I worked in a bank, so it's all good.
Oh.
No, that's it. That was a bad joke.
Are they still alive?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. You really were like, you really meant it. They died.
No, but I mean, it was always sort of like What is he doing? He's going on stage telling stories and jokes.
Yeah. Is that okay?
And people pay.
Are they okay?
Is he talking about us? So, yeah, I probably should have talked about them a lot more, but I didn't really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, so sort of biting, a little bit of antagonizing. But I watched a couple clips because I only shared the stage with you once,
Yeah.
and it's there's a little bit of story, but I wouldn't consider you a storyteller. Do you consider yourself a storyteller? I mean, you have put on these these one person shows.
We're going to say these long shows.
Well, I was going to say like one person
yeah.
shows,
Just
so long form shows.
Oh, long form, yeah.
So
I mean, I would. Some people say that I'm a storyteller. I do think that in my own life, like definitely, I like to tell stories. But yeah, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't consider myself a storyteller comedian like K. Trevor Wilson, for example. I mean,
right.
He'll go up on stage for 10, 15 minutes and tell one story. It always blows me away, the way he can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. With the cadence and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely somebody who makes it very engaging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you mentioned that you got some of your material from when you were working in advertising, and also some family events. And like I've watched a few clips where you are describing your neighborhood, and then you're getting into the people in your neighborhood.
Oh yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Where would you say the inspiration for a lot of your jokes comes from?
I think it's just like it's like a short circuit in the brain. I remember, like, I'm also a clown. I studied Buffon and clown, and that was my, honestly, it was kind of my gateway into stand up. Oddly enough, or maybe not oddly, because the premise around clown is like, do you just follow your impulse, right? Just like whatever you're at, it's like just keep, greater, more and more and more impulse you follow. So when I was finished studying clown, I was like, I need to figure stand-up out. And then it just, I performed clown, but it was like, it was just that, that way of performing just was how I always, from that time on, did. I always would say, like, I just wanted to be like I was with my friends, and family, just, telling jokes, telling stories, yeah, so like the inspiration comes from that short circuit where you're just like, wait a minute. And especially in advertising, when you look at the claims that are made versus what's being offered, you're like, oh, what? And so that just, there's so much. I swear I always have somewhere in my set a joke about an ad. And I mean, during this last year, definitely more jokes about ads and advertisements and all that kind of stuff and propaganda,
And your writing process, do you schedule time to write, or
no? Well, I mean, you mean write jokes? No.
Or to write at all? I mean, are
yes.
you doing like the morning pages, or are you doing?
No, I like, I'm working on several projects. Like, been writing with a friend, and we, just finished writing like a Bible for a TV concept. So yeah, we meet like once, twice a week. So I'm always writing for sure. And I finished a screenplay. Now I got to do more work on it. These things, they're animals. I'm like, here, I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I sent it to Scriptapalooza in Hollywood, and they're like, we're going to pass on this. And I was like, you know what? Screw you, Hollywood. So yeah, no, I don't wake up every morning and write. Like, I just, I if it comes to me, then I write. It's like this thing I learned from this one healer, where she's like, what feels light for you? What feels light to, read a book, or is it to work on this project versus this project? And that's, and in the last 5 years, honestly, like, I always continued writing, but the last 5 years I spent so much of my time was on lobbying. But I still performed a lot, and like I always, kept the new jokes in. But the kind of, here's the thing: I used to go to this coffee shop just down the street, and then I would write, like, all the time. So, I mean, I guess that schedule's changed somewhat because there's like I'm writing at home, but that was always a good place to just go. I'm going to, write a little bit on this script, work a little bit on that. If I had a show, it's like, okay, let's figure out, what to do.
I the amount of time that you spent on lobbying and prepping and the paperwork there sort of kind of got you. Do you think that kind of has helped you with your more creative writing since then? Since you freed up a little bit of time, but you got into the habit of writing, and it is now makes it a little bit easier to keep doing it
because of the lobbying?
I believe in habits.
Yeah, because of the lobbying, you mean?
Yeah.
Did that? I don't know. When it was almost like it was pretty uncanny. It was like I announced last January in 2020 that I was stepping down. So I didn't make an announcement to the community, but to the exec. And a lot of people were like, "What do you mean? Why?" There was resistance there, but it was like I wanted to accomplish so many things before I left, which a lot of them were accomplished. But it was kind of like the month or two before, I just started to feel it like I was letting it go. And I mean, when December 1st rolled around, I was like kind of right back before I started doing this, like just writing and doing. And it was kind of like just picking up where I left off. And that was really interesting, yeah.
Do you when we're talking writing, and this is something kind of we have to clarify in this modern age, how do you do your writing? Are you still a pen and paper person? Or are you typing out?
Yeah, I'm a pen and paper person. Over the last year, because there's been no shows hardly, I always carry my writing book around with me. So now, like, I'll, just type it in my phone. But yeah, I'm a pen and paper for jokes, for sure. 100%. Yeah, I can't. I go into, like, I'll go in, especially if I'm developing an idea, and I'll write on the side, and I'll cross things out and put things, just like everywhere,
Yeah. It's one of the hard things for me to get past, to move to a keyboard and et cetera, is the fact of crossing stuff out, but still being able to see it and reference it in my mind for carrying the jokes further elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's what's holding you back from moving to a more digital format, or
like, I don't know. I don't want everything. I just like that process. I don't want to type my jokes. Like, I do type my jokes when I've done my solo shows, putting them in a script. I don't ever want to change that unless I feel like it. But like, it's a different thing when you start typing on your phone. You don't. I don't know. It's something
you lose the speed of thought.
Yeah, you really do. And when you write, you can write really quick. It's like when you type, the thing doesn't. You're making mistakes and you lose it. It's like this. It's like something disrupts in that process. Something is disrupted, and I like. So I have every writing book I have. I write from the back to the. I write my jokes from. I started at the back of the book, and then in the front of the book is where I write things like. Again, the short circuit is like I read something and I'm like, oh my God, that's messed up. So I write it out. Like I've got, when I read books, sometimes I'm just really honest to God handwriting out stuff, paragraphs. And I'm like, okay, take it easy. Now you got to go back to, reading the book instead of making all these notes. But yeah. And then it meets halfway.
Now, do you have a separate book for set lists or? No. Do you write set lists?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the set lists, would they be part of the back or part of the front?
The back.
The back.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a Joey Elias in Montreal. One of the things he does is he actually, when he's writing a joke, is he says it out loud. Now you're very conversational on stage.
Yeah.
Would that be fair to say?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And he attributes that to the fact that when he's ready to bring a new joke to the stage, he has that down. Now, a lot of it comes for a lot of performers. It's being on stage constantly helps build that. But for people in markets such as Montreal, where there is limited stage time, I mean, and while we've had COVID, so there's been no stage time.
Yeah.
There is the ability to get that sort of that natural flow by recording yourself, listening to it back, and then editing from that to find the tighter word flow, the better word dynamic that'll work with your cadence.
Yep.
Have you ever tried something similar to that?
Do you mean like he records himself on stage?
No, he records himself in his, just
Oh,
I've got an idea. I want to see where it goes. Rather than writing until he's exhausted everything, he'll just start talking to himself out loud and listen to it.
oh yeah. Like
And
I definitely do that sometimes where I'm like, I have a thought or a trajectory, and I just, record it on my phone and
okay,
just be like, oh, and this and that and the other thing. And then I play it back, and then I'm like, okay, that's, this might be a part of the joke or not. But definitely I'll do that sometimes for sure. Especially when I'm high.
yeah, because pencils get hard to work when a little bit of indica is just making you numb.
Yeah.
There's now, do you do you record your sets rather faithfully or sporadically?
Yeah, no, faithfully. In the beginning, 20 years ago, when I started doing stand-up, I think the first time I did it was in 2001, and I did it very little. And then when I started up in 2004, 2005, yeah, I didn't record until, like, people were like, had their little recorders. I didn't do that. So, but yeah, then since these, when these phones, you had the voice recorder, yeah, I pretty much record everything. But like, some people video record. I definitely don't do that. And I think that's a good thing too. But sometimes like I audio record, but I don't listen to it very much. You know what I mean? Sometimes I do, where I'm like that, especially when I would do sets at the Underground. But if I was building a show, then definitely I'll be like, okay, let me listen to, all these different performances.
Yeah, and it's usually when you do something off the cuff and you go, what exactly was that? If
Yeah.
something got a big pop, you want to give it a second listen.
Yep.
It's interesting. It's kind of similar to my writing style, which so I can equate that a little bit. I do want to mention though, since we dumped a lot of it at the beginning when we were talking about Cask and the lobbying and the Mayor of Comedy short film, which people can watch by going to that link. I have huge respect for you for what you've done and your dedication to the craft.
Thank you so much.
Your dedication to all performers, which is, I mean, as individual independent contractors, it makes a huge difference for all of us.
Yeah.
Now the not to spoil the Mayor of Comedy, but there was a little bit of a down note towards the end.
Yeah. Really, I know.
I highly recommend people watch it.
Yeah.
But do you think the groundwork has been laid? Do you think that obviously Cask is still there, still working?
Yeah.
How tough do you think it is going to be to like get a major change or enough of a change that we can develop a star system here in English Canada?
Maybe Canada has to no longer be Canada.
I'm in Quebec. Don't say that too loud, please.
No, yeah. No, I mean, I love what happens in Quebec. Like, what would have to happen? I mean, I'm actually attending a roundtable tomorrow that I attended throughout this last year. They're resuming again, so it's like people from all the art sectors, and it's like, and its purpose was, how do we recover from this last year? I can't wait to see how everybody's feeling, but there's always this existential threat in English Canada to just the existence, like just that we can actually have sovereignty in over our own culture, but we don't. I mean, we're completely monopolized by the United States. So much so that it's like this is a cultural, it's a complete cultural takeover. I mean, are we even, that sovereign? One could argue no. But because when there's no, my background is history. I have a master's in history. So I was always so fascinated. Like, the Canadian stories are incredible, right? Of course, they're people. How many of those stories get into on TV and the popular culture? When we watch TV, what are we watching? We're watching American stuff. Sure, there's those couple of funny Canadian TV shows, but that's it. You know, it's hard to, I think, I do see eventually, yes, like, because we followed the music example. That's, you know, and they've been some of our early allies from the beginning. So that system is the same. I mean, they started what we just start, you know, they started in the 70s. It was the same thing. You know, musicians were being played on the radio, not getting played. And then they introduced Canadian content, and there was a lot of problems, but it's like, and people, the assumption was that Canadian music wasn't as good as other music from, especially American music, whatever the hell that means. But, you know, the American Music Awards. You remember that one? It's American music. Anyways, that's an old, old tune from American Music Awards. Which, do those even still exist?
Yes.
American music, yeah. So the goal is like, so anyways, and now the music industry is like $1 billion industry, the Canadian music industry, and you know our artists. Some people don't even think like will know that they're Canadian. So I do see that we're going to get there, but right now, I mean, who would have thought, you know, that this would happen? This has put a wrench in so much of what's going on. And if, you know, it depends how you look at the whole thing, but to me, it really feels like a real censorship happening in our country. Because all along, you know, all the while, big American productions are filming. You know, you look at what's filming in Ontario, and sometimes there's a Canadian production, but mostly it's American films. And the fact that everything was shut down, these guys had a run of our city. So it's like, I don't know. I really do believe it's like, I don't know where Canada will be in a couple of years and what it's going to look like.
Have you read Why I Hate Canadians by Will Ferguson?
No.
Okay, it's a great book. I don't know if you know Mike Moses, but he introduced it to me. But Will Ferguson is from New Brunswick, but he wrote a book. He's written several books, but Why I Hate Canadians, it's a good treatise on Canadian culture. Though a lot of it he wrote while he was living in Japan. So, but a big part of it is that, you know, a big part of the Canadian identity is not being American.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things too is we don't like people who stand out, like the tall poppy syndrome, like they call it in Australia, or in Japan. It's you know, the nail that sticks out gets hammered. But it's in Canada, we put more value on being number two.
Yeah, because that's the place that we've been assigned. We are.
The Americans are, we're number one. We're number one.
Yeah. So
we assume that anyone who gets to be number one must have cheated.
They cheated. Oh boy, these people. Oof.
Yeah.
What a cheat. What a cheat. I mean, so have we. You know what I mean? Like, we've cheated on so many ways. But when you look, you know, here's the other thing. There's no other example in the world where there's an empire and such a small country that border each other. You know, and I don't mean geographically, but I mean you know, the power. So it's like, you know, we are an invaded nation. I really realize that. I'm like, we've been invaded culturally, but every which way. And this is the way that invaded peoples behave. You know, I see it happen. You know, sometimes you're in a green room and like there's an American comic, either an American comic or a Canadian who just came back from the United States. And everyone's like, they just, it's like they're embarrassed to show their home. And it's sad. It's a sad state of affairs. It's like, we've just come to occupy that place. And, you know, the idea of like, you know, us being number two is from the premise that there's a limited amount, everything is limited. I mean, and that has a lot to do with, you have America that's just like, we have everything and we are everything. Well, you have everything because you steal from everybody. That's what an empire does. You know, people talk about the American dream. It's like, you have an American dream because you systematically rob the world. Like, you know, in a very, you know, obviously we do the same too on different levels, but empire is, you know, something else. you know?
And it's become more evident over the past year that they've moved from just robbing the rest of the world to robbing their own people.
Oh,
The conversation about a minimum wage in the United States is it's ludicrous. It's when you're seeing the stats of the fact they want to pay people $7.50 an hour, but if you wanted to have it parity with how it was in the 60s, it should be at least $15 an hour.
yeah.
And they're expecting so much for so little.
Yeah.
That sounds a lot like what Canadian comedians are
Yeah.
expected to give for
It's
those
it's like,
exposure bucks that pay our
yeah,
rents and such.
and yeah, and here, like the big thing that I learned was like the reason everyone stayed quiet, right? In comedy, we all had these grievances that I'd heard from since I started being a comedian, which is why I wrote that letter to the Prime Minister in my innocence. Hey, Prime Minister, but I mean, it was an open letter so that I could do it that way and air out the grievances. But what the hell was my point? I was going to say something about the Prime Minister. Oh yeah, that we stayed silent, right? We didn't speak up about what was going on. And in our silence, everything disappeared, because we wanted to be silent so we could work. Well, guess what? Everything disappeared. I mean, when you look at the Harper government and what they did to erode the cultural industry, and then, in 2010, 2011, when, the FANGs, they call them, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, come into our market, then, advertising dollars that used to go to the broadcasters are now going south of the border, and none of this money is staying here, which further erodes the system. It's like it's honestly maddening. But I don't know, like right now, I kind of don't care about, I don't care about the industry. I think what's rotten about the industry is that very word. The model of Hollywood is a rotten business. The art is beautiful, like I've been listening to this one yogi who's like, I don't know if you are following, but like, we're kind of what people are talking about is like, we're leaving this ego consciousness, we're coming into a light consciousness or a golden age that's emerging. And that in that new world, like it'll be truly just and equitable, like how it's been in certain ages, right? Like, I think it was the Bronze or the Copper Age. Shit was going good, man. Things were going fantastic. Because of the energy that was being exchanged, but we can get into that later. But that he says that in the future, in this new world, it's not like drama and performance will leave. It's that it'll be a service to the community, because the idea of wanting to be a rock star or a comedian, like I'm a famous comedian. It's like, that's why people stopped speaking up. Other workers pick it in front of their businesses, but actors and comedians don't. And you really are seeing that now. It's like, well, what do you stand for? What are we standing for? Are we standing for what the status quo, like what mainstream is? I don't know. But staying silent is a very dangerous thing. And then you realize, oh shit, I should have done something.
I mean, quality is a very subjective word especially when it comes to any of the arts. And anytime that a comedian or a group of comedians will get together to say no, there's somebody who might not have normally gotten the opportunity that would do it for a fraction of the cost. And then the audience is going to think that that's not so great. So yeah. Why do these others think that's below them? Because you're not getting a chance to judge us by our art.
Right.
Does that fit in with how you were thinking, or?
What do you mean? Like, when you repeat that again? I got it.
It's the idea of if a group of comedians get together because they think the pay rate or how they're being treated is not great, and they're good quality comedians, and they say no, and we ask other comedians to step with us. There's going to be somebody who would be not getting opportunities because their quality is lesser, that will come in and do the job.
Yes. That's been a big.
It's harder to regulate who is quality, because quality is subjective.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely something that, so many people would talk about. They're like, the problem is that there's always going to be that person. There's always going to be those people that undercut us. But I'm like, and that, in order to create like something like a cask, you need, everyone on board. And I'm like, no, you don't, because you're never going to get everyone on board. If you establish, like we've been working on a paid comedians guidelines for quite a bit now. It's like, what do we put out when there's no work right at the moment? It's establishing a baseline and then saying, this is the minimum, right? Based on all of these things, based on what's being taken up at the box office. But the truth of the matter is what Cask has been doing is laying out a foundation, for, money, filtering money into that world, having comedians, get direct access to funding, comedy venues. The whole arts infrastructure in this country is just, it was never for us. We were never at the table when this whole thing started. And now to get in, I mean, I don't like the Canada Council for the Arts. I really don't. I really, really, really don't. The Department of Heritage have found a lot of great people there. And I mean, they are the people that fund the Canada Council for the Arts. And they'll be like, well, we don't tell them what to do because we're an arm's length organization. We just give them the money. So the thing is that what the goal is just to open up the money. Like, just if the more places we have access, like when you look at the music industry, they have multiple places to be able to apply for grants. So what we don't have is, a star system. We don't have, what's the word they always talk about? Discoverability. There's no discoverability. It's like, when you have access to a grant and you're putting out an album, when a musician does that, it's like, then they got a tour and then they do their music video. And so then that raises their profile. So that's why to me, like to all of us, like going to Europe and, really pushing this export strategy is more powerful than trying to get into the United States. You know what I mean? It's like, that's more powerful, because then all of a sudden someone's like, oh, what's Paul doing in Sweden? And he's like, well, guess what? He's doing a tour. And so, to me, those are the things that make the difference. Just expand the access, right? Get access, first of all, expand it. And then, ask for the prosperity to rain down from the heavens.
And like when it was pre-Brexit, there was the being able to get the Commonwealth work visa if you were young enough. I didn't learn about it until I was not young enough to go over to the UK. And it's the population density is there, so it's so much easier to support stand-up comedy. And there is a star system in the UK for comedians. So it's
we don't have a star system because we're funding America's. We don't have a star system because of the United States, because Quebec does. So, it's systemic. The reason why we don't have, we're sort of lagging behind other, I hate using these words, but developed countries, is because of America. It's convenient to have us as a feeder. We're just a farm team. Shoot your films here. It's cheap. Your talent is cheap. So we can get them a day on a show and we don't have to pay them residuals. You know what I mean? And then when, it's Americans can come here, no problem. Come do our festivals, do everything, just for laughs. It's a government funded festival, and, where American talent is prioritized. That's the Canadian media landscape. American talent and content is prioritized. And so, it's all of these factors. It's like the self-hatred of Canadians, like not feeling the confidence in our stories. I mean, but I'm feeling like, from what a lot of people just, you keep seeing around, it's like Canadian filmmakers are getting so much recognition around the world. They don't get it here. Nobody in Canada. It's like, it's very hard. Like on the ground floor, people support Canadian comedy. Like when they go to shows, they're supportive, they're excited. But when they leave that room, and if they don't see that comedian, on a billboard, or
they'll forget the name as soon as they walk out the door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's a big issue.
Yeah. And I mean, clubs, I love them, but clubs have their own struggles, so they're selling their brand.
Yeah, and if it's a like in our country, I mean, when you look at American clubs, I remember going to the Funny Bone in Syracuse. I mean, Syracuse is the size of Sudbury, which is where I'm from. It was in this mall, and I mean, it was such a beautiful room. And you walk in, and the guy who's headlining, the person who's headlining, there's like a full, you know, promo lit up thing, like a full body length, even bigger, right when you walk in. Like he's the person, she's the person who's headlining this week. That doesn't exist here. I mean, that old saying of De Breslin, where it's like I could put a dead person's name up on the marquee, and people are still going to come to my club.
Yep. Yep.
Which is great that you built a great name, like, but you can do both. That's the whole thing. You can do both of those things.
You can. Yeah. How can I say this without being in trouble? The thing is,
speak your truth, brother.
Yuck X did a kind of. They needed to sort of do it, but they to the point that like all the small towns would get once a month a show coming through, especially like up north, etc. When Yucks was at its height, and that meant those people who lived in these small towns, when they came to a city, when they wanted to see comedy, they didn't call it a comedy club. They would go to the Yuck Yucks, which is something that really did well for their business model.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it didn't serve the artists who were there.
No.
And it didn't serve the artists who were going up. And also with the Yucks model was that they don't teach, they take care of everything so the comedians don't learn about self-promotion.
Yep. You disappear when you go on that roster sometimes. Especially when you're doing these small gigs, which I did so many of, and I love them. Like some people think that I have like a major beef with Yuck X. I mean, I think we all do. I just believe in like being fair and just. And so, it's like you go on that roster and you disappear. Because if you're doing those shows, nobody knows where you're going. No, they're not advertising that you're going to be in a small town. You're not advertising because it's a gig. You're not being like, hey, I'm going to, I don't know, there's a million small towns just outside of Toronto. And and those are great gigs, obviously, because you're getting paid, but like often it's just such a good time. But it doesn't really do anything for your promotion. That's
building a brand, etc.
Well, and we see how this last year, how that had, because now Yuck X is talking about like going and, promoting more comedians, like doing that more. And it's like, I mean, I think it's a good idea to, do that because then it just creates more.
There's a number of comedians who came out of Yuck X who went on and learned, self-promotion, and they're usually the ones who go back there and they arrange door deals.
Yeah.
And so they have a set number of clubs, and they know that their self-promotion machine is enough to fill the club every time they go there. So they work on a door deal, which gets them more money because they've learned that being known can increase the paycheck.
Yep.
And it's so hard in Canada to become known.
It's almost impossible. It's almost impossible. Like I worked in branding and advertising. So, I did my master's in history. Then I worked in branding and advertising. And when I started doing shows, I was like, I literally was working with like the most talented graphic designers. So I'd be like, hey, can you design my poster? And then I would project manage, major projects for like brand redesign and all this other stuff. So it's like, the first posters I had, I was like, yeah, you got to have a look, the font. And so I knew that from, I knew that from the beginning. And it's like having that look to your show really, makes a difference. But again, if there's if you can build a great thing, sort of following in a city that you're in, you can.
Yeah.
But when it's not translated into TV, which is, then,
Yeah, just I mean, and again, to use the music thing, it's like Terry David Mulligan, like playing music videos in Vancouver to reach right across the country, and then the breakout of Much Music, which has sadly changed so much.
Yeah, that was a really good Much Music. We were talking about how that was so good when it was, because there was like, even for comedians, there was like
The
there was
video on trial.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then Speaker's Corner, like there was some really cool stuff. I do believe that after this business, whatever, because it's already happening. What they predict in the world is like, people are going tribal, they're going local, and we're just going to support each other on every level. So I think that there will be a major renaissance and a demand for. I mean, I know that the move in the world is like from the elites is to create like a global, like a one world government, and that's what they want. But I think what most people want is not that. And astrologically, it's not what's going to happen anyways.
We got Benjamin Boss has said, "Hey guys, really enjoying watching." So thank you very much, Benjamin, for tuning in. It's also available on repeat. So if you're typing stuff in and you're watching the repeat, what? Sorry, I'm not getting back to your comments. But anyone else? We have a few watchers. So if anyone else wants to say hi, say where you're watching from, and name your favorite Canadian comedian. How about doing that? Let's see. Let's test the audience. Name your favorite Canadian comic. I won't be hurt if it's not me. Really?
Me neither.
Okay.
We both.
So, the past year with the shutdown and everything, and let's talk about America and what's happened there. Some of it has spilled over here with like the Black Lives Matter movement, with the murder of George Floyd, the social impacts that has come out in this past year. What's your take on everything that's happened? I know that our industry's been shut down, but
I mean, well, I think what I'm seeing is just like, first of all, in our country, we're no longer, our government is completely acting outside of its constitutional authority. All of the measures that have been introduced, the social distancing, the lockdowns, they're unconstitutional. And they've been predicated on the idea that, we have to do this because we have to stop the spread of a virus, and, when you look into it, you're like, well, it's not what they're saying that it is. And it's, I mean, I know some people might say like, oh, this is conspiracy, but I don't no longer believe that. So it's like, we've been, we're part of the World Economic Forum. We're taking directives from them. Lockdowns are prison techniques. They're not, quarantines are for, viruses or medical situations, but not lockdowns. So, I mean, it's such a loaded thing. What's this, from what I understand, the lockdowns were to put this one world currency in, to get us all online, erect the towers, put the surveillance in, and do this while we don't realize what's going on, So
I did see your interview last night, so I did a little bit of research.
Right.
And calling the lockdown unconstitutional, actually it is constitutional under public safety. Just like it's like saying having to wear a seatbelt is unconstitutional because it's against my freedom. But it's not. There's laws for that.
Well, it's
because for public safty.
Well, that's what they claim, right? So the whole
that's what legal researchers say. Yes.
Well, but then there's there's like lawyers right now who are like putting a whole bunch of class actions and tort cases around the world. I don't know if you're familiar. So what they say is that the premise under which all of these measures were taken was because there was this virus, that there were a lot of cases. Well, what they're saying is like that PCR test, the test that they've been using to determine the amount of numbers is a good diagnostic tool, but it's not a test to measure any kind of infection. So if you look at that, because when you look at all the death rates of from 2020 to 2019, there's not that many more people that have died. So it's the and they lump asymptomatic people into those numbers, and so it's a lot of sleight of hand. We have a medical emergency, we have a health crisis, and we need to protect vulnerable people. But there's all these virologists and epidemiologists who are being silenced, who say, lockdowns don't work. You can't stop the spread of a virus. This virus is like, according to a lot of people, it's, every virus has different, targets different demographics and, different symptoms. But this is no different than other, virus seasons. So that's what this is the debate. It's the numbers and who's broadcasting them and where are they getting them from. So I've been looking at, if you look at all the stats, WHO, CDC numbers of deaths, you look at, you're like, there's not much difference between this year and that. So what are they all talking about? And these numbers are fraudulent.
Okay, you're saying look at the numbers, see they're not changed, but they're fraudulent. There's
I mean, the numbers from the media are fraudulent, but when you report.
Because last night after watching your interview, I did check the WHO numbers, and the World Health Organization. There is a huge spike in the past year.
Okay.
Okay, from deaths from flus.
Okay.
Couple of the other things that you mentioned, I want to make sure I get these comments. Oh, shit's getting good now. Okay.
But deaths from flus or deaths in general? Is deaths in general gone up?
Death from influenzas, which does include COVID-19, was discovered in 2019.
I mean death, because, a lot of people say that sometimes when people go into the hospitals, they'll give them a COVID test. And if the test is fraudulent, so they'll say they died of COVID, but they died of something else.
Well, Cuomo's just got in trouble in New York for the fact that he was underreporting. So,
I don't know.
You could either go either way or just split the difference and go with the numbers. There's one of the other things is it is a transmittable virus, which transmits when people congregate. That's why I appreciated the lockdown, because I have friends who have had COVID. I have a friend of mine is a musician, and he's lost 40% of his lung capacity. He's going to be on blood thinners for the rest of his life. He's not even 50 years old. And forget singing again.
I'm not denying.
Thankfully, he's a great guitarist. But the thing is, it can be transferred when people are being casual. I know you stated before that you don't like to wear the mask, but the mask is not to protect you; it's to protect others.
I don't believe that, but it's okay.
Okay.
I don't believe that at all. But it's just how we perceive these things. I don't believe you would. Cutting somebody's oxygen supply is very dangerous.
But it's not the mask that we wear. A doctor doing open heart surgery wears 10 to 12 masks.
But they're only doing it for a certain amount of time, and they don't wear them all
which
day.
could be 4 or 5 hours.
But
if they were cutting their oxygen for 4 to 5 hours, there's a chance they could pass out.
Yeah.
People are wearing that little amount of time.
But people now in retail and wherever they're working, they're wearing these masks all the time. This is just what I believe. I don't, it's just from all the people that I've been looking into. And, again, it's all to me, all of this is the pretense that, humans are separate from nature. You can believe they did tests in during the Spanish flu where they gave, people went, they took healthy people, brought them to where there were people with the influenza of Spanish flu, and they would did everything from going up to talk to them, and then and at one point they even injected their sputum inside their body, and those people still didn't get sick, because the whole thing is that people get sick if their immunity is low. I don't think that's changed. I don't think that idea has changed. You're right, there are people who will get sick. I could get COVID. I'm not saying that I couldn't. But from what I've learned, especially about health and like yogically and spiritually, it's like when you're vibrating low, that's when you get sick. When you're vibrating high, you have a less chance because your immune system is boosted. I mean, here's the thing. These are all differing point of views, but what's happened is there's a big swath of people who've been silenced, and I really don't, like, I don't believe in masks for me. If you want to wear a mask, that's perfectly fine. But it actually suppresses people's immunity, and it's really bad for people. That's how I see it. But I don't, and I wear it when I got to go places for sure. But I think it's a bad thing.
I've been wearing it, and luckily I've been healthy. And
you look healthy.
Thank you. Mentally, it's been rough. Let's face it.
Yeah, I know.
But there was a number of things that you mentioned on the interview last night. You mentioned, because I have to read this because I have such a hard time remembering it. It's hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah, and
chloroquine. Sorry.
Yeah.
Which I did some research on last night and again today, and it's an anti-malaria drug, which doesn't really fight malaria. What it does is it fights the symptoms.
Right.
And one of the symptoms, how it does that, is by reducing your immune system.
Okay.
So if you're saying that if our immune system is healthy, then we should not have a problem. But that, which was, which Trump owns a piece of the company, and that's why he was promoting it early on. But to find a medical professional who's not making money off of that, who's willing to promote it, is very rare.
But there are a lot of people, like I said, there's a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing of this Dr. Corey, where he talks about ivermectin, for example. And, that those, that stops people from getting really dire, right? Like from them going to the hospital, that these drugs have been around for a long time and they've been trialed and they work. So why are they not using them? Instead, they're pushing these vaccines that are I was just reading on the WHO website today, and it said, we still do not have a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine, so it's like, I just think it's so crazy that you have all of a sudden there's a virus, and then there's all of a sudden, oh, look, we got a vaccine. And the vaccines are doing so much damage to so many people.
If I can just take a little bit of a moment, I live in Montreal. Montreal is the conspiracy capital of Canada.
Yeah.
There's the Di Stormer assistant editor, or he lived here in Montreal. The guy that started the Proud Boys lived in Montreal. The modern father of the flat Earth movement was a comedian, and I remember when he started it as a joke. As soon as he started making money off of it, he really propagated it, and he made a cottage industry for himself. Now, so I will encourage everybody to research everything that's being said here.
Please do.
And make sure that you're researching from reputable sources. Because you mentioned on yesterday's thing that no vaccine has been approved by the FDA.
Only for emergency use.
But I checked the FDA website, and Pfizer has been approved for all ages. Moderna has been approved for all ages. I checked it yesterday. I didn't check to see what date it started. AstraZeneca has been approved for 18 and older, and they've applied to have it for people 12 to 17 as well. There's a minor one called Janssen's, which has also been approved. So I just want to make sure that information is out there in counterbalance, because you believe that they are not approved.
Well, I read,
and the CDC, the Canadian version of the CDC, or the FDA, has also approved them for use in Canada.
Well, the last time I looked, which wasn't so long ago, they have just approved them for emergency use only, and not for. And so, it was just emergency use. And you went on their FDA website and they said that, because that's what I've
last
seen.
Night. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe, but I don't think they're safe and effective. But it's just because I've seen all this other evidence.
Right.
And it's not mainstream evidence, a friend of mine today was, we're having a discussion, and, there are people that claim that there are more injury from these vaccines than in all the last 20 years of vaccines. And so my friend was like, well, that's because you've never tried and vaccinated so many people before. But I'm like, there's only been, from what I see, like there's maybe about 700 million shots have been administered. And so but if you're going to talk like, I know that maybe we haven't done this huge worldwide vaccination rollout, but like accumulatively over the last 20 years, there's definitely been more than 700 million people who've gotten vaccines, but that there's been more injury in this short time. I mean, it depends where you look for your information.
I'm curious to know how you define injury. You also mentioned that in Canada we've reached herd immunity, which we have not.
You know, I guess this is all just how we interpret.
Yeah.
I think that we just are looking at it from two different ways. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons, and I feel like
you're upset that I said these things, and you want to counterbalance and say that I'm wrong. But I don't think there's.
I'm not so much concerned. I'm not calling you wrong. I'm just a little worried, and I wanted to share information here because you know how much I do respect you. Yeah, and I respect everything that you're doing and have done for comedians in this country. But it also means that you're a public figure, which means when you're saying stuff, people are listening.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff that you said, like I was doing my research. I was watching your comedy clips. Oh, this interview, she's doing an interview the night before. And so I'll watch that to try to get some stuff. And it started when you talked about how you don't like wearing masks. You believe they cut off your oxygen. Now, the purpose for the mask, like the reasons how vaccines work, right? I don't like, I had to do the Reddit thing, explain to me like I'm 5, you know, like they give you a weakened form of the virus so your body can learn it and then learn how to defeat it. So then when you get a strong dose, right, your body knows how to fight it. That's how building the immune system with the vaccine works. Now, the vaccines that we're getting are 80 to 95% all stuff that we get with every vaccine, which is just basically something to keep the virus weak and in stasis. So when it goes into our body, it won't be strong enough to truly hurt us. Though some people do have reactions from it, partially because they may have been partially exposed to the virus ahead of time, because people are congregating, are not wearing masks. Now, the danger is, and this is the latest example of that danger, is the new Indian variant, which is even more contagious, which has now hit the UK. And there was the UK variant, which was more contagious. So far, none of the variants have proven to be more lethal, but they have becoming more and more contagious, which means it's easier for people to get.
Which some people will say it's because we've been wearing masks. But like variants, there's 4,000 variants to each flu virus.
Yeah, and that's why we get when we're getting our flu shot every.
I don't get the flu shot.
Okay. Well, people who get the flu shot every year. You're only given the ones that they think will be spreading in that year. And that's why you can still get the flu after the flu shot, because it might be a new flu. Yeah. Like when we saw the buildup, like we saw like pre-SARS, we had a buildup in a stockpile in this country of different medical supplies. And that's why Trump, when he came into power, he sold it off in the States. And that's why the States got hit so hard, because Obama had left it prepared. But he got rid of it. A lot of it, because he just saw it as inventory that he could sell off. And then when something actually happened, now a lot of people will go, well, SARS wasn't that bad. SARS is from the same family. But the thing is, we were more prepared and we were more active at that time, and there was less people questioning it. And because more people were trying to be protective, and SARS is not as contagious. Right. Right. We're talking about like COVID. COVID is like SARS times 50 when it comes to how contagious it is.
But again, those are based on what numbers? Are they based on the PCR tests?
So you're going to question, right? If you can't
look into the PCR test, and then you'll say, So yes, there are diagnostic tools inside of hospitals that can determine whether you actually have the virus. But the test, the PCR test, which is what everybody around the world has been using, is not a test for detecting infection. It's what it does is it's a magnification tool, so it can really go in and see what's going on, but it's not so. And then anything under 25 cycles, a threshold cycle, or sorry, anything over that is really false. So that's using that test is a fraudulent way to determine case numbers. That's my point. It's like, if you're testing people who are asymptomatic and then they test positive because you've been using this PCR test at this high threshold, well, you can find virus particles that are ancient in your body. You know what I mean? That you've carried on from your genetic code. So, like, again, I'm not denying that, that it's not deadly. There, each one of these viruses that have come in are, carry their lethality for 100%. But what I'm saying is that how it's being talked about in the mainstream and how they've put it out there, so much of it is fraudulent. And if it's based on this PCR test, right? If it's based on this test, that's not an indicator at all. I'll send you some of the stuff that I've seen. This Reiner Fuelmich, he's pretty amazing. And if you follow Rocco Galati, who's a constitutional lawyer in Toronto, they're just, they have their point of view. And look, I don't want to fight with people. And I know that, like, this does, sometimes when I say these things, people, get upset because they think it's dangerous. But I'm like, I think the opposite is dangerous. I think what we're doing, it's like, it's no coincidence. Just if you look at how many people are dying, it's not like they changed the definition of a pandemic in 2008 when Bill Gates started messing around in the WHO. So a pandemic used to be a disease where multiple people around the world would die, like a lot of people. And then they just changed it to a disease that pops up in other parts of the world. So if you look at just like how many people have died from it, it's not, of course we mourn all the deaths. They're all significant, but they're not, it's not like what they've made it out to be, some insane, very, 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 very deadly disease. It's not that. Yes, it's deadly, and it's attacked certain populations. There's this one scientist, Vandana Shiva. She's a seed activist in India, and she's been lambasting Gates so much. She says, the reason why these viruses keep getting more lethal is because we keep going and disrupting the ecosystem, right? So these viruses are okay in the forest. When they come out of the forest, they become more deadly. So I do think, it's not like I don't think that obviously people are getting this disease. I just know lots of people who've gotten COVID, and it's like, mild symptoms. And then they treat those numbers like everybody's sick. It's like, well, last year you would have just said, or 2019, you would have just been like, yeah, I'm sick. Like, I think I got COVID in December of 2019. Like, a lot of people who thought they got sick, and I was sick. You know what I mean? But again, it's like, it's sometimes, people explain it, well, it's just the way that these things sort of filter through. But I don't know. There's just too many things.
All these people who get like a little bit sick, and don't feel that bad with the symptoms, they have the chance to spread it to everybody. Like, there's a comedian there's a comedian we both know who wasn't being as careful with his mask, but he was living with his parents.
Okay.
And that his father has passed from COVID.
Okay.
And that's a Canadian comedian. There's other comedians in my network who I know, like in the States, who have died.
Yeah.
This is like, it's the thing is, just because you're going to be okay doesn't mean that everybody's going to be okay.
Well, and
everybody you come in contact with is going to be okay.
No,
and that's the risk. That's the part of the reason for, like, I have a big beef with the Quebec government because of how they've handled the lockdown, because they're doing some things that are not smart. My ex-partner worked for the city, so she was getting the figures about the transmission vectors. And one of the hugest transmission vectors, like the top two, was in retail and schools, and so they shut down retail, but they opened up the schools right away.
Yeah.
And they knew that was going to be, but that was economic pressure that's on them, like to do so, and that's why that meant that more people were getting it, so there's more chances for more variants to pop up, and it was going to prolong how long we are going to be suffering. So the people who aren't wearing masks, the people who want to open up everything because we're close enough, are the people who are going to risk us being shut down a lot longer. One of the things here, we also had a curfew here, which made no sense to me because, like, I'm an older guy, so I need to get out and exercise, and with the streets being crowded, I didn't want to do it on crowded streets. So I was taking me walks at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and then they gave us a lockdown that we had to be in our doors at 8 p.m. So anytime I wanted to go outside, the streets were kind of busy, right? And the parks were full.
I was in Quebec a couple of weeks ago. I was in Quebec a couple of weeks ago. It was a curfew. I went to go get some food, and the girl's like, there's a curfew. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I guess I shouldn't be here, but I had to eat. I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. I think there's just two sides, and we're getting further divided around sort of some issues that we don't need to be. And there's so much, there's so much information that's being put at us. And, if you believe in the mask, like, that's cool. I don't think that those things, I think they're just more immunosuppressant. Like, I guess, maybe you say, okay, your friend, the father died, he wasn't with his mask, but we can't say that that's because of the mask. Like,
it's this person actually said he'd wear the mask when he went out. So he wasn't worried about his parents, but of course he wasn't wearing the mask at home and interacting with his parents there. And he was out interacting with other people
with his mask on.
Well,
why would he wear his mask at home? Is that what you think?
No, I don't think people should wear the mask at home. But the thing is, if he wasn't going out and meeting the other people, then his parents wouldn't be at risk. Like, if he wore his mask at home, if he wanted to go out, then wearing the mask at home would have made more sense. But it's not like it was an unnecessary risk he put on his parents, and it ended wrong. It ended in tragedy.
Yeah. But I think, we could go deep. We don't have to. I think that there's just like, there's like documents from like Germany. I think it's some kind of a report where if you're from the point of view that, this was, there's a strategy behind a lot of this, that they said if they can make children feel guilty or responsible for the death of their grandparents or parents, then they've succeeded. Because it's like, do we know that it was him that got his parents sick? And maybe that's true for sure. Honest to God, my parents have been in and out of the hospitals. And, my dad was like in a ward where there was a COVID outbreak. He's 90 and they gave him multiple tests and he never got it. Thank God. We were scared of, we don't want, right. Cause I know people who've had COVID for sure. Like, and I was like, it's pretty terrible. But then people, I know people who was like, I got it. It's mild. So it's like, I'm just saying, if we were to just take this, and it was like 2019, what would we be feeling around it? There was so much media around this. My concern is people's health. It's not like, my concern is trying to prove one way or another, but it seems to me there's just too much that doesn't make sense, right? Around the measures, that's what you
realize that's a textbook introduction to any conspiracy theory.
Yeah, I know, but why are people offended by that? Conspiracy becomes history. Like I know I do my research. I'm not trying to convince you otherwise. I think people get worried that, I'm saying something that's conspiracy. Yeah, because, the powers that be don't want any of this information to come out. They don't, this is a very strong narrative they want to keep pushing, but that's just the way that I see it. I see the war game. I see the propaganda campaign in it. And I think it's just unduly for what, it's just unduly put so many people into poverty. It's been this massive transfer of wealth. I mean, that's pretty insane just right there.
The one thing, like, if it's been hijacked for a conspiracy, like somebody's managed to get all the world governments to agree on this one thing.
They don't even have to do that. They don't have to, like, they can, you know, I think when they go to 100%. I mean, I remember like Italy. I mean, that's where my family is. It's like seeing that go crazy. You're like, what the hell? So I don't know. There's just too many things. Like if you just look at other documents, like, you know, the Lockstep Rockefeller Foundation document. I don't know if you've seen that. There's like an Agenda 21. It was like literally a simulation of a pandemic just before this one broke out. So there's just a lot of things. Like if you look at the Lockstep Rockefeller document, they literally, everything they say is what's going on. I mean, could it be that they're just, you know, listen, I guess I'm of the point of view. I sort of look at, oh yeah, of course you're trying to fuck us over. And you're putting people in undue risk when you don't need to be, because I don't think our governments give, some of them, they don't give a shit about our health. You know what I mean? I think they're in a lot of relationships with different people and they're just promoting different interests. And so, but they're not taking care of the people who need to be taken care of. Have we corrected migrant workers' work conditions, living conditions, old age homes? We've not done that. We've had a year. Like that's the priority. That's what we do. That's how you stop. Just the richest people have to agree. And he's right. Benjamin is right. And I think that's what's happening. It's like, if you look at the propaganda campaigns of World War I and World War II, they're very similar to this one. They're very similar. You know, I think I'm not opposed to people getting vaccinated for this. You know, if we have proper trials of it, and you know, some people will be like, well, you know, they did the trials and everything looked great. I'm like, but you can only know the effectiveness of a vaccine after several years of putting it in trial. And this was
actually the way vaccine trials would normally be is they would complete one step and then they complete the next step and then they complete the next step with different groups.
Yeah.
Right. So what they did was they cut the paperwork on this so they could do all the different groups at the same time.
But you still,
and that's why the vaccine was able to be approved quicker.
But you still only have 24 hours in a day, right? To know the actual effectiveness.
Yes, I know, but because in the traditional method there'd be months between each group,
I understand
and there's a lot. There's a lot. You know, there would be a huge, like a paper trail and a huge investment in the time between these trials. And all they did, like, I mean, part of this I got from watching John Oliver was the fact that they decided to do all these trials at the same time and then correlate the data together to be presented.
No, but I mean, you still can't see how, like, you know, it takes a couple of years, somebody on trial to see the effects of it. You still long-term trial, and they don't know that. I know the mRNA has been under research for the last 20 years. So it's not like they haven't done the research, but they've only tested that out on animal populations. I'm saying, absolutely, you want to have a vaccine for hundo, let's do it. And you know what? Canada was developing a really safe one. I think Cuba's working on something. So there's some really, it's just like, I'm saying, when you look at the players and who's distributing these vaccines, these people are not great people. Pfizer
refused to take any government money because they wanted to make sure that they could patent it. Like anyone that had purse strings attached to it from the governments are now facing the fact that they're not allowed to patent, which is a recent reversal.
I saw a big one here. Let's see.
Let's see what Benjamin had to say. Globally, our monetary system is based on nothing tangible. Like we used to have a gold-based currency. The U.S. used to have a gold-based currency, but we don't. Ad capitalism is at a point where we can't be controlled anymore. So now they have to control us. And I'm saying this, I got my vaccine and I've been respecting the rules and trying to get this thing over, mainly because I missed comedy. I'm right there with you, Benjamin.
Me too. And I'm following, like, what do you think?
The thing is, the countries are financially suffering from this as well.
Oh my God. It's
Like it's your Bezos and Elon Musk. They're the people who are, they're the ones who are hurting, not hurting. They're the ones that are gaining.
so that to me is a really big sign of like something is not right here. You know what I mean? Like you don't tell me, like I live right across the street from, like I live right where the film district is here in Toronto. And like when I would see these, like, well, we were both actors, I just didn't understand. And when I was part of this round table, people from the theater sector were like, we just don't want to understand from the government, like what is really going on if that's allowed, right? And there are hundreds of people on sets. And again, I know people say, well, it's really safe because they're giving people tests. Well, if this test is fraudulent, then what are they measuring? But don't tell me you can't put 10, 15, 20 people in a movie theater just to keep that business going. I'm not about throwing, like, because the system we had was sick. This is all, people say, and I believe, what is this about? It's about the elites being like, oh my God, the planet's kind of like, where the resources are limited. And they're just trying to take the resources from us. Look at what's been happening in India, with the farmers protesting. It's the same story. The colonialists come, they take the tribals off the land, and then they put their own garbage in. Well, it's the same game. It's the same play that's happening right now. So, it's just like, I believe in self-sovereignty and people being free to choose. You know what I mean? I want I would love if the world was all meditating at the same time. I believe that we can be super healthy because it's happened before. I just think in this mechanistic, this is what Vandana Shiva is like, militaristic system that's like there's like two sciences. There's the Cartesian science, and then there's, the theory of relativity, Einstein, where things are like, self-sovereign and self-regulating. This other system destroys, right? And then all of a sudden people are sick. And so then it's always like taking more, destroying more. There's like 1 billion masks in the ocean. I mean, is this proper? How do we can do, to me, it's like we can get to the nth of technology and advancement, but we haven't done it with respect to the land, to the people. And so that's where I'm coming from. You know what I mean? I am, again, I'm not, like I said, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I just believe in a vaccine that's safe and effective. And, why did we rush it? That's all. That does not make sense to me. That's all.
Well, I mean, normally they had time. That's why they did rush it on this. That's why they cut the paperwork that was necessary to kind of wait between trials. But I just had a flat memory flash at the Dark and Dirty Festival in the set that I lost to you with. I actually mentioned that what was it? Okay, Benjamin is putting in the testing feels super rushed. John Oliver has a great example video of why that worked. So whether or not you believe John Oliver and his research team, that's the other question.
Why
so I do recommend
PCR
that
test works?
No, not the PCR, but why the testing feels super rushed.
Clinical trials.
The testing for the clinical trials for the vaccine. But I had a joke about the fact that I think because I updated it depending on what it was it might have been H1N1 at that time, or it could have been Ebola. Trespassers will be shot. This is these are our warning signs that we're getting too invasive into nature, into the sacred places of the planet. And so Ebola is no trespassing. H1N1 is trespassers will be shot. Exactly. That sort of was my take on it. And again, it's we are being exposed to these viruses because we are going deeper into, we're trying to colonize parts of the planet that have not experienced us yet. So we are seeing how it sort of fights back, how what's there will adapt to us, because that's basically what happened. It is a disease that is normal among bats jumped the genetic strain to be effective against humans.
Yeah. And, I didn't, it was about in October that I started to see the game, the war game of it, because, I was like, and then I realized I'm like, I'm just following mainstream media. I need, and I knew people in my life that were like anti-mask and, that were like, there's something not right. And I was like, I just want to listen to everyone and, and just understand. So that's when it started to, open up something else to me. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to consider all, right. It's like, let's just hear out what people have to say. And I think right now, if someone puts out an opposing view, like what I said last night, and, and I know I get upset too, because it's like, I'm like, look, I see it this way. I want you to see it my way too. But I think like what we need, and, what they say, we're coming out of this ego consciousness, out of the age of Pisces. We're now in the age of Aquarius. Pisces which was the last 2,000 years, was about secrets and hierarchy. Aquarian age is about openness and community, and the hierarchies will all come down. So it's like, the elders predicted this, they said that, look, it was the animals telling us that we'd gone too far. So no matter which way you look at it, the end of the day, we've gone too far, right? So here we are in a predicament, and it's all muddled in all sorts of things, people's health, people taking advantage. So it's like, how do we come back to the center so that you and I can sit and we don't get upset at each other? And I do respect your choice. Honestly, I respect everyone's choice. I just want people to be okay. That's honest to God. Like, I am scared. I'm really scared, because I'm like, and I realize too that even when you start looking at that other side, whatever that other side is too, both scenarios are pretty dire. So what I've been doing is, thinking of like being like, okay, where do I vibrate at a higher frequency? This one yogi I was looking at, he was talking about vibrating at a higher frequency, right? So that, because when we no longer are in fear of this system, then it has no effect on us. So he was talking about like the Bronze Age or the Copper Age, where there were these yogis who would go into these pyramids that they built, and we still don't know how they did it. And they were vibrating at such a high frequency, they would broadcast signals to other people, other yogis in other pyramids around the world. And the earth was in a stasis, like was in a peaceful time. And this is what they predict is emerging. So I hear that, 2024 will be like an age of utopia. So it's like, and I think it's so hard right now, because we've all been tested so deeply. And so like when we hear a view, they're just like, oh, come on, no, like maybe what you're saying is dangerous. And I perceive what you're saying is dangerous. But I think like we just need to come to the center and like, and come to the center and just be, our humanity to each other.
Yeah. A couple little notes. I've just thrown, when you were talking about how come there's so many more American film projects and Canadian film projects that are happening in our cities right now. Part of that is because the insurance costs to do it are so high, and the American media saturation and the potential payback on their projects is so high that they can afford to do it, whereas a lot of Canadian productions cannot do it, so they have to kind of work around it using the smaller crews, smaller casts, etc.
We always get fucked.
We always get fucked. Now the other thing is, why are the Americans rushing to do this? And a little part of my brain is going, well, they saw during the Black Lives Matter movement what happens when people are stuck at home and have time to read and think. So they want to make sure that we have more stuff to binge on Netflix and
it's bread and circus. Yeah. So
I mean, it's le plaisir de voir. Is you're familiar with history? That was the French term of it. For the bread in the circus.
What was it called again? Sorry.
Le plaisir de voir,
right.
Which is part of the reason why Just for Laughs exists. It's the same kind of thing. Montreal is filled with festivals all summer.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that way people won't be upset if they take a look at what the government is doing. Wow. And that's the way those things kind of work. That propaganda that you mentioned works. I'm just worried when things kind of people begin to see more conspiracy over what is something that could be like, there's obviously going to be people who will try to take advantage of any kind of crisis, let alone a international health crisis. But it's if there's the fact that there's people who are building their fame off of denying it, and you're not denying that it exists.
No.
So I'm not accusing you of that, but it's these kind of things that sort of muddy the waters that make it harder for us to get past it. But then in the past year, Zoom shows. Let's try to get it back up.
I know. I was like,
or say what you need to say, because I sort of did my closing argument. You can.
No. When you said today, you're like, "Is there nothing you want to talk about?" I was like, "He's not going to want to talk about the virus." And here he is. I was like, "Oh, and you watched me last night," and it's like,
you know what? It would not have probably been mentioned other than the fact that I always cover a section of what's happened in the past year. And so I want it, normally that's when people tell me their takes about how they're hopeful for permanent social change because of things like the Black Lives Matter movement, of the defund the police movement that is helping, that's causing some change, of the fact of the removal of Trump, and hope that Biden would be different. All these things.
Who even believed that? Who would believe that Biden would be different? I mean, this is the illusion. These are all these illusions.
The puppet game
are going to just shatter. So all the shit that we've been led to believe is slowly being cracked. And like I said, my brain split open last year when I sort of started to see something else. And so, anyways, no closing remarks other than, like, honestly, be healthy and vitamin D and breathe and get exercise, Yeah. So Zoom shows.
Because Montreal was the 7th worst hit city, so we shut down faster and harder than anyone else. Like, when I'm saying 7th worst city, I mean in the world at the time when we shut down. It just grew here so quickly. So during the past year, did you participate in Zoom shows? Or what alternative performance mechanisms were you employing?
I did. I've probably done a handful of Zoom shows. I did like a panel show last summer called Soft Left. And that was like, we just went on StreamYard and it was 4 or 5 comics and we just talked issues. I mean, you'll see how different my point of view is, how it's shifted since then. So we did like 10 episodes of that. That was super fun. And then last summer there were shows, but I've done a handful of Zoom shows. I started my own podcast called Small Battalion. So I started doing that, which is what sort of precipitated so much of like the research, was that like my podcast isn't a conversation. I look at a book, I report on the book, and then, so alternate. Yeah, that's it.
Sorry, to be clear, your podcast and everything can be linked from your website.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's the website is underneath us right now for anyone who is curious. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I've done only a handful of Zoom shows, and I don't go search for them. They've been fun. Like the first couple were like, oh, I don't know, and then they are fun because it's like fun to see people. But I don't know. Someone's like, do you think this Zoom is to stay? I'm like, I do think that obviously this has changed clearly we've changed. This is going to change everything. This is not going away. But when we get to go and do it in person again, will these Zoom shows die? I think a lot of them will. Like, if we can go back, eventually we'll be able to go back and do our thing. You know what I mean? I don't, it seems very precarious at the moment. But I mean, when you look at the United States, I wonder how many of those Zoom shows have literally disappeared now that people can go and perform again. But from what I understand, like, I've got friends in New York, comics in New York, and they're like, there are shows, but there's not a ton of them yet. Right? What about you? Have you done Zoom shows?
I've done a few. Like you, I try to be conversational with the audience, which is so hard on the Zoom shows.
Well, I learned that when you start to just like go, that's what I'm like. I just start looking at people and then I just call them out, and that's what made it funner for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I see that. I see that technique used, but there's always that sort of like that little lag, etc. Or there's some people who are muted, and and the laughter is harder to hear. If you ask somebody a question.
No, I was gonna say, it's like you're in an insane asylum.
Yeah. a little bit, like, or looking through the windows of an insane asylum, and some of the glasses are broke and some aren't. The Windows glasses. But yeah, I think there has been. You mentioned the panel show that you were on. I think there's also a lot more panel shows happening online, or appear to be more panel shows
Canadian
happening
ones?
online. Well, I do one. There's just in Montreal. There's also there's two others I can think of right now. Elsbeth Wright has a brilliant one. Didn't you go on hers, Battle of Wits?
No.
It's a great panel show. I do one that's for geek culture called BattleCom. There's High with Ty, which is sort of a panel show.
That's great.
Yeah, and these are things that could easily be translated to in front of a studio audience, like the Great British, panel shows that people in Canada eat up. I just think that would work so well if we could get the Canadian networks to feel beholden to the Canadian public, to put Canadian talent on screen. And that's one of the reasons I love Cask.
The truth is that, there's this book of, I'm such a nerd. I've read the most obscure history. So there's two books. It's called 100 Years of Canadian Cinema and The Tangled Garden. And The Tangled Garden just lays out, once NBC comes in our space, this is, I don't know. I feel like it's a death knell for maybe, it's like Bell and Rogers. The only way to really compete is create content. So I don't know if I'm saying what I get. My point is we can't rely on the broadcasters. I think, obviously these OTTs, these over the top platforms will be the way. But again, most of them are American, and who knows? But I think I think this will spawn, right? It doesn't cost that much money to make a panel show.
At least, sorry, I've got to point out the amount of merch I'm wearing. I've got a StreamYard T-shirt. I've got the StreamYard pillow. I've got this. Joanne actually got me on because I couldn't figure out OBS or Zoom. So Joanne got me on to StreamYard. And,
she was the one who got us onto StreamYard. She was producing the show with me.
Yes.
The Soft Left. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's at least one of the owners of that company is Canadian. There's two owners.
Oh, good.
One is there's Gage and Dan, though they've just sold themselves to be a division of something called Hopin, which I'm not sure where the ownership of that is, but it does have a Canadian influence in there. But then again, so did Superman. So
yeah.
Yeah, those Canadian Heritage Minutes, 50 years down the road, they'll be talking about StreamYard.
When did you start this podcast?
I started this. This is episode 57, so it works out to be roughly one a week. So, shortly into the pandemic. And I've been trying to keep a weekly schedule, but occasionally I have done some extra episodes, but I have occasionally skipped some when film work does arise.
That's so good.
So this has been going on for a while. For anyone that's interested, the back catalog is visible. You can check out on the link tree that's running on the bottom. If you care to support the show, you can do that through there. You can also find the YouTube channel for the They Talk Funny and click on that. Check out the back episodes. There's one question though. There's one question that I found out about when I did the research about you. And then I could find no details. It's even mentioned in the Mayor of Comedy, but there's no details. You had a car blow up?
Yes.
like exactly. It was
What
just,
happened?
and then the car blew up, and that was the end of the story. It's there's no one was hurt.
Yes. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do you want me to tell you the story?
Please, without my interruption.
No. So it's 1999, and I just enrolled into classes at Second City. Right? I was working in marketing advertising. I enrolled at classes. I'd gone to see a show. I'm like, this is amazing. I'd moved to Toronto in '96, so I'm like, I did a bit of theater in university, but again, anyways. So it's January 2nd, and I'm coming back to Toronto because I lost my job just before Christmas. I was working at this branding firm. And so I'm on the way back to Toronto with my friend, and we're on Highway 69, I guess Highway 400 now, but Highway 69, and she had run out of windshield fluid. So, but it was a beautiful day. It was like blue skies, but wet on the ground. It's winter. She ran out of fluid, and then her windshield was so caked. So we're like, okay, we got to find a gas station. And we see one. It's Key Marina or Key River. I don't know if you know where that is, but it's like just maybe, I don't know, 45 minutes outside of Parry Sound. Okay. So we see this gas station. She puts her signal. She lets a car go by, and then she proceeds, but she doesn't see there's another car coming really fast. And because the windshield is caked, so it hits my side, like just behind me, it hits us really hard. We spin. We end up in a snowbank at a gas station. And I couldn't get out of my door because it had hit my side. So my friend gets out of the car. I get out of the car, I go over the stick shift, and underneath the steering wheel, it starts to smoke. And I call 911, and she's like, I'm like, hey, we just got into an accident. She's like, where are you? I'm like, Key Marina. Because I never knew it was Key River, whatever. She's like, where is that? I'm like, I don't know. And then the car blew up. And I'm like, oh my God, the car just exploded. And she's like, are you still in the car? I was like, yeah, I got really great reception. So this was at a gas station, and the people that own the gas station were just like freaked out. It stopped the traffic. My mom and sister back in Sudbury, like going, doing like shopping, and they hear this on the news. And my mom's like, call Sandra. And then, they shut down the highway. I was rushed to they brought me to the hospital in Parry Sound, and had my head strapped down to a board. And all I could think of was, I hope I make my class at Second City this Saturday. And I did. I did, because it was like, so yeah, that was like, everything in the car was burnt. It was literally insane. And then my life changed. I became a comedian. It was this moment. And then I remember one of the first people, I was in therapy with these physios who did energy work. And they're like, sometimes the universe hits you really hard to stop you, to be like, hey, what are you up to? And then that was kind of, I would say, was the beginning of my spiritual journey, because, at the same time, a really close friend of the family died in a car accident. And I'm like, why was I spared? And he died. It was so tragic. And I, for the longest time, I was like, why? He was such a wonderful person. And so anyways, that's what happened there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
It's a really,
just Ben.
I love Ben. Who's Ben? Is Ben a comedian?
I'm not sure who Ben is. Benjamin Boss.
We don't see a face. We don't know.
We can't see the face. But I
like, though, Ben, what you said, though, that sorry to interrupt, but I liked what you said, that they can't control us, because a lot of what sort of, goes on in the conspiracy world is that we are being so controlled. So, I'm with you too. It's like, because when I was in Quebec, I was there shooting a commercial in Quebec City, and I had a what's the word? A realization. Was like, if control is an illusion, right? Then then none of this is real. At the end of the day, whatever, people say, we live in this matrix, it's this simulation, right? And it's a matrix they set up. Like I was saying, in October, I'm with some friends, we're getting high. My friend, did I say this already? My friend repeats this, not friends, he talks about this most elaborate conspiracy theory, and I was like, oh my God, I see something. Because I'd always been told about this matrix, I went to see the movie a couple times, I was high, and then I'm like, oh, now I get it. And it's like, I guess the thing is just like, some of these lessons are, become aware, look for the information, read all the information. That's an historian's job. It's like, let's look at the stuff that's being silenced. What is being silenced? Let's see that. So let's just see that. I mean, we could talk Sadhguru, Sandra. Oh my God. Kundalini yoga? Ben, I'm a Kundalini yoga. That's what I practice. Sadhguru. Oh, Sadhguru, you mean the man. You mean the person, Sadhguru. Yes. What does he mean by middle?
I believe when we asked if he was a comedian, he went yes, and then he said middle. So that makes me believe he's must be Toronto-based with Yuck X. Because they're the ones that are very much putting people in the ranks. So yeah, he's saying Sadhguru is the man.
He's amazing. Oh, good. See, I also listen. Hey, Benjamin, I listened to Shania Mutri. Paul, I would totally like. I'll send you a couple links. This guy's like speaking truth. Like it's just unbelievable. I'm a working middle. It's my favorite spot on the lineup is a middle. Anybody else? Doesn't being a headliner just feel so oppressive? So, not oppressive. You're like, oh god, I got to do 45 minutes, and then I'm like, how am I going to do 45 minutes? And then I'm doing 50 minutes. You know?
Oh, he actually is. He's in Alberta, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Sorry, BC boy. So he's all the way. So this is Canada represent here because I'm from the East Coast. You're from Sudbury. He's from
West Coast.
The West Coast. Well, the West and the West Coast. So all these things are coming together. My father wasn't born in Canada. Your parents weren't born in Canada.
No, where were your parents born? England?
Well, no, my all right, this is kind of a weird thing to say, but my father was sold to Canada to help pay for British war debts. He was a proud resident of the Dominion in Newfoundland. And when Canada, after the war, said, hey, England, you know all that money that we kind of loaned you for the war? We need a little bit of it back. They said, take Newfoundland. And then they had Newfoundland do a vote, and it wouldn't matter what they voted. They became Canadians.
Wow. That's why it's been cool watching. Aw. I love that.
It is. It's like the middle. The middle is the one where you get to have a lot more fun. I like hosting a lot.
Me too.
Personally, hosting is a lot of fun, but it's the thing is, if the longer jokes, you can't break them up between sets. Like I love going up to a cold audience and warming them up. Like there's a sense of accomplishment there.
Have you done your own like shows? Like had your own, like you were the host of your show, you booked it, you did all that?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I've done that for open mics. I've done that for, pro-ams. I have a show that I produce that's a variety show, or I did except for the past year. And that one there also involves like burlesque and circus arts. And
I'm a clown. If you ever need a clown, I'll come to Montreal.
That would be a joy. It's a Wednesday night show, so the budget's not big, but it's.
Well, and when we attended the German trade mission, we met some people from Montreal, and what's the name? It's a circus. It's not Cirque du Soleil, obviously, but it's another circus.
Blue Mushroom Circus or Cirque du Boudoir or Cirque.
Something else, you're going to know it. And we talked about collaborating, and I need to touch base with them again, because it's like what we realized was like how we need, this we realized it then, but I've also been realizing it for a while. It's like, here's another problem with our broadcast system. We're not exposed to French content, like Quebec content. And when I started watching, like one of the shows I watched was C'est comme ça que je t'aime, that show. Yeah. Did you see that?
I have not seen it. My French is very poor. I live here and my French is very poor.
But there's subtitles. I mean,
Yeah.
So it's such a great show. And then I was like, why are we not in English Canada being exposed to Quebec content with these great shows? So like we also realized during this trade mission that like what we need to do is build like this solidarity, and market, create like an exchange tour within the country, and build up that model, because and it was so exciting. Like I wish I remember the name. It's like everybody knows this circus theater name, but what do you think? How do you think we're coming out of it, and what do you see? Like for comedy, what are the plans in Montreal? Is it going to open up? I know Just for Laughs is planning some stuff.
Yeah, Just for Laughs is doing some virtual shows. Most of them are based out of the States.
I heard that they are. Like the live shows are based out of the States?
Yeah, they seem to be like, I've tuned into a couple, and they seem to be more like panel shows, like a group of comedians talking together and then put one on the bigger screen.
Okay.
There is, and there's not like a professional setup. There's Rodney Ramsey has created a virtual comedy club.
Yeah, that looks really great.
The Known Unknowns. What?
Yeah,
I'm trying to think
Unknown Comedy Club.
The Unknown Comedy Club.
Yeah.
Which he's done a brilliant amount of work for that. It looks great.
It really does. That's cool.
That's one of the Zoom shows I did. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, you're like, it just looks amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And
What do
yeah,
they?
I think the online shows will kind of continue because there's a certain novelty to be on a show with somebody from Japan and somebody from Australia, right? And or and somebody from the UK, and all these comedians that you may or may not know in one virtual space, and so the audience can discover somebody from far away, but they might discover somebody who's also close by.
And that's very cool, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if we could do a Zoom show and then, go and drink at a bar. I mean, not that I'm a big drinker at a bar anyways, or like, I'm going to do a show at 7 and then go to look, obviously there's so much good, like interesting stuff that comes out of these things. I hope Canadian comedy comes into its own when the world figures out all this stuff. Yeah, it's like Canadian comedy, Canadian comedy has already come into its own.
Yeah.
Right? On the ground, hey, the best
Canadian comedy, I think, is kind of the world standard because so many great Canadians are in the UK, kind of driving a lot of the comedy scene there. So many Canadians are down there. I mean, Lorne Michaels has always had Canadians on his writing staff for Saturday Night Live. There's been cast members who are Canadian. There's Mad TV had Chris Finn wrote for Mad TV. He's a Toronto comic guy. Like there's so many Canadian writers that are comedy writers in the States, as well as Canadians who are making a living at it there. That when they did show up and start out as the new guy again in the States, they were already so polished because of all the road work that they've done here with the recognition of having name recognition that would come from doing it in the States.
Yeah, and to me though, it's like like how many? What do they say? Like Hollywood is like a little Canada or a little, it's like, to me, when you start to look at borders too, you're like, these are just fictions, right? They're just, borders just a way for the Queen and some rich men to collect tax forever. But like the border is like, they use it out of convenience. So, it's like, why are you making it hard for Canadian artists? Like the United States, especially over the Trump administration, made it hard for anybody around the world to get in. But it really really got difficult during after 9/11. Because, when people say, well, look at all the great Canadian comics, you got Jim Carrey, you got Mike Myers, all those people went to the United States when there was no problem to go to the United States. So, go to 9/11, that changed. But to me, this is like, whoever you let into your country is your foreign policy, right? America's is what it is, but we're their neighbor. We got a free trade agreement with these people. You don't think like, we deserve to be able to go there as easily as they come here. And so when you stop that flow, and then you make it really hard, you're literally charging a head tax, and it's like, you can't talk about, Hollywood without all the contributions that Canada's made. It's like, where does that, how do you quantify or qualify that? You can't, because all this brain drain that it keeps going. How many people have just left Toronto now? Because people are like, this is, or, Canada. It's like, what's happening up here? So it's like, and then our stories, when you literally go there, our Canadian stories disappear. Sure, you can, like, I think now it's more cool. Like, I think somebody like, Steph Tolev really just talked about being Canadian. So, like, she didn't care. A lot of people would go to the States and be like, pretend that they're not from Canada. Well, it's like, just talk about being from Canada. And I think that, this is what destroys culture, is when you leave and you no longer tell those stories of your land.
Yeah. And that's also something addressed in the book Why I Hate Canadians, is the fact that Canada cannot recognize its own talent until it's been verified by an external nation.
So it's so annoying. It's so terrible. But it starts with us.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I whatever spearheaded this movement, but certainly was not my intention to start an organization. Are you nuts? Like, you think I would have taken this? Like, you think am I crazy? But it was something that came through me, and to leave it in December, like, a lot of people are like, why did you leave? What happened? I'm like, nothing, just that it was exhausting and insane. But to me, it was like either I was going to leave or stay and fight, you know? And, and it's like, we have to come to the terms with it's historically imperative to speak your truth, to talk about what's going on, to say, hey, look, you guys are mistreating us. Because then when it's gone, what do you got? Like, and the last year, our lobbying cycle was the most aggressive, yeah, and stressful it had ever been. Because right off the top, our lobbyists are like, okay, when the government started announcing the stimulus money, the $500 million for arts and culture, we were like, hey, will Canadian comedians and venues participate? And they're like, whoa, maybe venues. And I was like, well, what do you guys define as a venue? They're like, can you tell us? So we put together a report of what a venue was. And then the money comes out and they're like, yeah, unfortunately, Canadian comedians and individual comedians and venues will not qualify for that money. It's all going to existing people.
Now there's a website is showing below, canadianstandup.ca. You can donate to that to the fight, and they also there has been funds for comedians in need over this past year. So please donate. The link is below. I will put the link in the descriptor a little bit after. We've been talking for 2 hours. Did you realize we?
Yeah.
This has been okay. Sorry, it's been that bad.
No, it's been amazing. That's why I was like, I kind of don't want this. We let up, and then we went. Then the explosion happened. You remember? And then I was like, oh, this is tense. Oh my god, And then, but then I'm like, now I feel just soft. I just feel goodness.
I did want to mention these things from watching yesterday. But I at the same time, I do not want you to think it diminished my respect for you and what you have already accomplished.
Thank you so much. I mean, do you disrespect the things I said?
I'm seriously concerned because the thing is, it's the more transmission vectors there are, the greater chance for a variant to come out that could be more lethal or affect more people or not be able to be affected by the vaccines. And that's why I'm staunchly pro-mask. But that's the thing that sort of scares me on that. Benjamin is saying, thanks guys, because he heard us starting to wrap up. But I wanted to, address that with you, and hopefully I made you think a little bit. Obviously you've made me think on some things as well, and you're going to be sending me some links, which will be great.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is just talk to each other. People are really they shut down and don't want to talk, and it's like, look, I'm not trying to push an agenda. Who the fuck? What kind of gain would I have from talking this? This upsets. This is a very, very touchy subject, and people get very upset. I'm just like, I just want to share what I know, and I just want to have conversations. I'm grateful to have those conversations because, my mind. Look, again, these are narratives. What do we believe? What do we ascribe to? But what I think is dangerous is when we fight with each other. Because I think when we look at the top and what's taking down, that's what we should focus on. I mean, it's what comedy, it's what, the fight for comedy was. It's like, okay, the reason I wrote that letter was I was like, something stinks really bad in Canada. What is it? And then, it was literally those last 5 years were a mix of me doing my master's research again, and then being an investigative journalist, chasing a story, because I've even come around a few revolutions around this, the Canadian media as well. So it's like, so interesting.
There's just what we're being told kind of thing. A very simplified portion of Quebec or Montreal history is the fact that after France ceded the Quebec to the Crown, a lot of the businesses in the province of Quebec ended up being controlled by Scottish money people, and they treated the French obviously as second-class citizens. And then when the French began to unionize, they took the money people took advantage of the Irish famine and imported a lot of workers from Ireland. And then they turned to the French and said, well, we'd like to treat you better and pay you more, but these Irish will do it for cheaper. So that caused a clash between the French and the Irish. And of course, they were just still up top, just counting all their money. I mean, that's the way, so many times that anyone's doing a swindle, that's where it's coming from. Benjamin mentioned earlier, watch where the money is.
Yeah, so. That's what I say to people. I'm like, follow the stats and follow the money, and then you start to be like, okay, something bad is happening.
Yeah, and there's always profiteers as well, but
always been. It's just now in an unprecedented. Now it's just like, again, like what I see is that if we're in this ego consciousness coming into light, whoever these people are, it's their fear programming. So, and that's the other part, is that when there's so much fear on the planet, that a lot of that is constructed. It's like, it's manufactured fear. So that's where, it's like, okay, let's fight, deal with what we have to deal with. But why are we propagating this fear? You know what I mean? When people are in fear, then their immunity goes down. So it's like, it was a big part of Canada to be like, take vitamin D, like all these things people are proving that vitamin D, zinc, spirulina, these are all thieves. These are all great things to help you combat and not get COVID, right? And then the government's like, yeah, no, vitamin D, they took it down or something. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And why are you not telling people every day, this is good, like eat this, do that, like, do you know what I mean? Instead, it's so much like numbers, dying, death, blah, blah, blah. It's unreal, and it's fucked up.
Yeah. If it bleeds, it leads is been a news story, mantra for a long time. And that's because the human brain is wired to remember pain and fear more than it is wired to remember the good things. That's why I do recommend everyone to consciously kind of make a list of all the good things in their lives, all the things that bring them joy. And I'm not saying that in a Marie Kondo way. I'm talking about, like the things that your happiness through the day, and try to remember those and carry those thoughts forward to kind of make you happier and calmer in your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Did I just get into philosophy?
This is good. I mean, I think we could go for another 2 hours on philosophy and just like, what do we, it's really, in Kundalini yoga, they have a 10 body system. So I don't know if you know much about Kundalini yoga, but it's like the first yoga. It's the king of yogas. So the way they practice it is like how they practiced it 10,000 years ago. And when you just see how like brilliant it is, you're like, they say that what Kundalini yoga knows, Western medicine science won't know for another 500 years. So it's just so intuitive and so deep. So they have a 10 body system, and your physical body is just one of them. So there's like the positive, negative, and neutral mind. And the best place to be is in your neutral mind, right? But that your negative mind is the weakest body, which is why so it's the one that needs the work. Like you need to strengthen your negative mind, because your positive mind is like the one that's like, oh, everything's great, which if it's too strong, then everything is amazing. So your negative mind warns you, and the neutral mind is what brings you together and just like, okay, I'm calm and peaceful. So the negative mind is the weakest one, which is like, it's like what you say, it's programming. It's a program to be fear, but it's like, it's that mind that's the weakest body.
I think that's a good place to end on.
Yeah, You're probably like, I gotta go. What do you do now? You go eat, do you go and watch TV and eat chips?
I'm actually on set tomorrow, so I have to prep some alternate clothing to wear and make sure I have all my paperwork filled out for it.
Oh my God, of course I'm taking up, you need to go to bed. Do you have to get up early?
Well, actually, I just saw an email come in that should be my call time, so it might be 6 a.m., but that's not too early. And I've really enjoyed this conversation, Sandra. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Honestly, this felt like a transformative conversation. And one last thing, were you looking at the thing the whole time, the camera? Where was
most
my
of the time.
eyes? Where are my eyes? Are they low?
Your eyes. If I look at your eyes there, that's your
Where
eyes.
are they?
See, right for me right now, it's that way. That's you. This is my camera.
That's why you like. I've been looking at you. I'm like, you're looking at me, but you're looking at the camera, and it's like I want to look at the camera, but then I have to look at you.
Because I've got eye contact. Just
Oh yeah, well that's right. Yeah, that's clown. You got to look at the eyes.
Yeah, and I've also got like all of Benjamin's comments have been on the side, so I've been glancing over there, and I had some of my research notes on that screen. So a little bit of turning my head here and there.
But your camera's probably up like this, right? You're like see, this is where I need to put mine.
Yeah, I've got just I don't. How can I show my camera? That's really hard.
That's amazing. You're literally on a green screen, and I didn't realize that. That brick wall, that looks so good.
Thank you. It's nice and flexible.
This is the part of the podcast that like, what do we just doing? Like, hey guys, we're just checking out the set and being like, what's around the corner?
Yeah, my messy room. That's why I've got the curtain
up behind.
But Sandra, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for being on. Please, people, donate to the cast, the Canadian Association Stand Up Comedy, which also includes clowns and improv as well. No,
sketch and improv. It doesn't include clowns because circus.
Because clowns.
So you could have funding. Yeah, they do. The Circus Arts gets funding under the Canada Council of the Arts. The one thing I'm just going to say about the website is currently under construction. So if you want to send to donate, because usually on the website you go, there's a donate button, but right now it's under construction. So just send an e-transfer if you'd like. You can go to the website and it'll have contact information for Joanne. But
it's info@canadianstandup.ca. Okay, yeah. I'm just going to type that out. I put the capitals in there. It's not necessary to put the capitals in there, but that just makes it easier for you to remember and to read. And I hope that, no spelling mistakes. Woo, did it without my glasses. So
you're pretty seamless. You're a pretty seamless guy.
Well, I guess that's just because I have the suit pressed out so much. It's a fat joke. There's the mayorofcomedy.com. .com. Yeah. So you can watch that live, which is a brilliant documentary which explains the beginning of Cask and its journey to Ottawa, and of course Sandra Battaglini, which I was told I got permission to pronounce it that way. That was that close. Okay, Battaglini.net, and that's Sandra's website. So the links to her podcast, etc., everything is there.
Yeah, and a shout out to the filmmaker Matt Kelly. I mean, he'd be a great person to have on your podcast. I don't know if you remember, like he used to do stand up, so he's so brilliant and like
the name's familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't have, he's a mastermind. So his views on all this stuff. He's that obviously that documentary is both of us, but he was the mastermind. I mean, both. You know what I mean? Research. It was insane. It was like it was honestly, that whole thing was totally insane. And then, we were looking to get distribution from a Canadian broadcaster, but guess what? Even I guess a documentary about the Canadian meat industry is going to have a hard time getting picked up by the Canadian media.
Oh, the joys of it all. Sandra, do you have any shows in the future you'd like to mention?
I have maybe a corporate gig on June the 10th. No, I don't have any. I don't have any shows. I'll be in a Pizza Pops commercial, I think, soon, and that I shot in Quebec City, which was so great. I mean, yeah. Anyways, but what about you? What do you have coming next so I can follow?
Well, I've got my online shows tomorrow. If you want to get drunk with me, I'll be doing the Love Doctor live stream with two burlesque performers, and we'll be answering the audience's questions about love, sex, and relationships.
That's great. That sounds fun. So you do a lot of them. Do you do a lot of these Zoom shows?
Well, StreamYard rather than Zoom, but I've got 2 weeklies, which is this They Talk Funny, and the Love Doctor live stream. 3 weeklies actually, because there's another one that I do with some friends, which is just a check-in and hangout, and we kind of prop up each other's mental health in the process, and anyone who wants to join us, we sort of bring them on. That's Fridays at 2 p.m. And then the last Monday of every month, I do BattleCom, which is a task writing show it's pop culture debates, but the audience, we have a live voting system, so the audience votes for who they think is most entertaining. So we set up questions like, what's the best defense in a zombie apocalypse? And then we'll take 2 performers at a time, and then we'll do a positive round, writing positive jokes about their choice, why they think their choice of the best defense in a zombie apocalypse is the best. And then the audience votes, and then we do a negative round where they get to be negative about the other person's choice they've only just heard. So it's a little bit of improv.
That's super cool.
If it's tied at that point, we go to a free-for-all round where they can choose to be positive or be negative, just be entertaining, or do a roast attack upon their opponent. So nothing physical, just...
Yep.
Yep.
That's great, man. All right. You know what? This is like, you know what? And I call this an Italian goodbye. Because it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna stop now. No. Yeah. And then it's like it takes you an hour to leave. And I will say that I might have had a lot to do with this going on longer, right? Or we both did. We both did.
Look, I enjoyed the conversation. If I didn't enjoy the conversation, it at no point did tonight's conversation feel like work to me.
No.
It's been highly enjoyable. And I think those are the best kind of conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these ones I do, it's a struggle to get to 30 minutes, depending on how forthcoming it is with people. Most of them are about an hour, but this has been the longest one so far. And
I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you.
Yeah, it's been a joy. I hope it doesn't scare people off when they see that it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes, but it's
yeah. We have to do a part 2 now. We have to do a part 2, right?
We'll do a follow. We'll do a follow up when shows are live. Maybe we can do a live podcast with the 2 of us in the same room at some point. Sell it to CBC and
and see how that goes.
See how that goes.
Just it'll be like, oh, that's great. Just sell it to America. Who knows? I mean, CBC. What are you gonna do? Anyways, you have a great day on set tomorrow. It was such a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me here and actually having just a really lively and robust conversation about some really hard stuff.
It's a pleasure. And again, I want to thank you for not only for the amount of times you've made me laugh, but also for the amazing work that you have done with Cask, and you're continuing to do with Cask as its spokesperson.
Yep.
So Sandra Battaglini, thank you.
Pleasure.
And thank you, everyone who is out there and been watching. This has been They Talk Funny, episode 57, with Sandra Battaglini, and her website is there, so please check it out. I've been Paul Ash. This is They Talk Funny. I'll be back next week with Niles again.